A surge in coronavirus cases pushes India to the brink. Once praised as an example for curbing COVID-19, India's infection rates are now the fastest growing in the world. Did government complacency let the virus spiral out of control? And what, if anything, can be done to contain it now? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is India's second wave of COVID-19. With so many deaths every day, funeral pyres in Delhi's open-air crematorium now burn 24 hours, with authorities fielding requests to cut down trees in the city's parks to keep the fires burning. India reported 5 million cases this month alone, an unprecedented storm of infections that's pushing the country's healthcare system toward collapse. Still, the government says there's no need to panic. Help in the form of ventilators and even raw materials to manufacture a vaccine are pouring in from the EU, the US, and even Pakistan. But many say the aid is too late. And as Natalie Pohonen reports, India's COVID crisis will likely get worse before it gets better.
Oxygen. It's become one of the most precious commodities in India. As hundreds of thousands of new coronavirus cases are diagnosed each day, the demand for it has skyrocketed. In some hospitals, medical oxygen has simply run out. There are just too many people who need it. Volunteers from this Sikh temple in New Delhi are providing it to people desperate to get it to family members in time.
I don't know what government is doing. Then we can do it. Why can't government not doing?
The scenes coming out of India are almost apocalyptic. This second wave has pushed the healthcare system to the verge of collapse. Even if you can get your hands on oxygen, the next struggle for many is finding a hospital bed. Animesh Kumar went to 2 hospitals in Delhi to get his relative admitted. Neither would take him. He says the oxygen in the ambulance is running out. These are the desperate scenes playing out across India, day after day, hour after hour. So just how did it come to this? The Indian government, after all, had been praised last year and even at the start of 2021 for its handling of the pandemic. In early February, there were on average about 11,000 cases a day. Restrictions were eased, the vaccination drive was getting underway. A sense of complacency from the public, parts of the media, and political leaders set in. At the start of March, the Indian Health Minister said the country was in the end game of the pandemic. That declaration turned out to be terrifyingly off the mark. The second wave of the virus has affected millions, and the case count keeps on climbing. The government, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has come under heavy criticism for allowing mass gatherings, like the Hindu religious festival Kumbh Mela, even with a surge in cases. Modi himself went on the campaign trail for his Bharatiya Janata Party in the lead-up to various state elections. Up to 800,000 people turned out to see him speak at this rally in Kolkata. Social distancing made impossible by the sheer number of BJP supporters. Modi has said states should only use lockdowns as a last resort.
कोरोना की पहली वेव का सफलतापूर्वक मुकाबला करने के बाद देश हौसले से भरा हुआ था, आत्मविश्वास से भरा हुआ था, लेकिन इस तूफान ने देश को झकझोर दिया है.
For many, this second wave and the lack of preparation for it has also shaken their faith in the government. The cost of this surge has been incalculable. Never-ending plumes of smoke from crematoriums fill the air. Family members were here one day and simply gone the next.
She was COVID positive, Mummy. She was a nursing officer. Nobody helped in time. We were running here and there for a ventilator. She died after the oxygen ran out. No help is given to people who are doing government jobs even. It's better not to be here. Everyone here is positive.
India is a nation in constant mourning. And still the question remains, did it have to be like this? Natalie Perhanen, The Newsmakers.
Let's get straight to our panel now, all from New Delhi, starting with Gopal Krishna Agarwal. He is a national spokesperson for India's ruling BJP. Dr. Manish Jangra is the founder and chairman of the Federation of All India Medical Association. And Devanak Saha is a doctoral researcher at the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. Thanks all so much for being with us. Devanak Saha, let me begin with you. I want your take, on what you think really went wrong. We know this has been politicized, but some blame is merited, where India's leaders dropped the ball and, for example, allowed for huge gatherings to be held, correct?
Yes, so I think there are a few issues which went wrong. The first is that India, especially our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he declared a premature victory over COVID even before the vaccination process has started. So if you see the BJP's website and Twitter and his handles, the party even passed a resolution saying that the government has defeated the pandemic and we have won a victory which has been globally acclaimed. The second issue is that because of this complacency that we have won the war, the government did not focus on ramping up the infrastructure. For instance, under the PM Cares Fund, which was a fund which was started by the Prime Minister as a fund to start fight the coronavirus, there was a delay of 8 months in allocating oxygen plants and getting the tenders out. So that is the second. And the third is that despite the cases rising in the end of March, the Prime Minister himself attended rallies after rallies in the West Bengal election, a state which is an eastern part of India. So he continued to attend rallies. And in one rally, he even said that as far as I can see, there are hordes and hordes of people and I can't see an empty space. That is completely outrageous. And add to that the Kumbh Mela, which has been much criticized, it is still on. If you see pictures, it is still ongoing. I know the crowd has decreased, but it is still ongoing. And the Prime Minister apparently made a subtle request that please, it seemed like the Prime Minister was a powerless man asking a random person that, okay, please just stop if you can. But it seemed like he's very powerless. So I think these are the three main issues. But I would say that the first is the most important issue, that India declared premature victory and they assumed that everything was fine without even the vaccine, before even the vaccination process had started. Yeah.
Gopal Agarwal, it's your Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. He had actually urged states to avoid lockdowns, if possible, because of the economic damage, and he allowed for those religious festivals and those massive political rallies to go ahead, having declared victory. Why such a level of complacency there?
At the hindsight, you can call that there were certain gaps in the implementation of the fight. But what the Prime Minister and the Bharatiya Janata Party said was, we won about the first wave of the COVID. Everybody knew that there will be second wave, but the depth and the severity and the extent was never calculated, and nobody knew, because all the modeling, etc., which predicted about the second wave never gave this many numbers. So there was certain constraint which developed with regard to hospital beds, oxygen. But the Prime Minister has never stopped working. I can give you several occasions where since last April 2020, the central government has been giving permission for oxygen plant within 24 hours, setting up of oxygen plant. The central government had also sanctioned about 162 PSA plants. Then there was import of 50,000 metric tons of liquid oxygen. So the things are difficult at this present time. But over last 2-3 days, if you see the growth in the number of cases, in absolute number is higher, but the speed of growth has certainly been slowed down. So I think within this, today only also 450 metric ton of oxygen was transported by the railways to different states, from Uttar Pradesh to Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh and Delhi. And even international players are also helping. I think within some days, though the crisis is higher, but the problem of oxygen,
Okay.
etc., and number of beds will be under control.
Let me move on to Dr. Manish Jangra, because Dr. Jangra, you have been the firsthand witness to the effect of the mismanagement in the most terrifying way possible. I mean, you were working on the front lines and you actually caught COVID only to be left without even a hospital bed to be treated in. I want you to tell us a little bit more about your personal experience, but having heard kind of the justification as to why there was a level of complacency and how we heard the spokesperson for the BJP say it's now been compensated for, do you think those excuses are good enough?
Thank you, ma'am. Firstly, I would like to tell one thing. I have seen the ground reality of this situation, as I am also have worked in COVID for past 3 to 4 months. And the sir, Gopal Krishna sir has told something. I am little bit agree on that thing. I will come to that point also. The thing is that situation is getting worse to worse. No political party has done anything for the healthcare workers. GDP expenditure is still 1.2%. No party, no government has increased it to a higher level. No party, Congress party, BJP party, Aam Aadmi party, no one has done anything for the healthcare structure. And this is the result of these things. We are struggling. The condition is worse. We doctors are feeling helpless. There is no oxygen in any hospital, no ventilators. Only 14 ventilators are there in Ram Manohar Lohia Hospital, New Delhi, formerly known as the Wellington Hospital. The India's central government, the biggest hospital, come after AIIMS Delhi, and there are only 14 COVID ICU there. See the situation. PM Care Fund, for what thing that was utilized? You would not believe. Only 1,000 crore to 2,000 crore rupees were used for the buying the ventilators. 100 crore rupees used for the vaccination, and 1,000 crore rupees used for the migrant laborers. Where is the rest of the PM Care Fund used for? It is hardly around 10,000 crore rupees. And 10,000 crore rupees are not a big amount for the government of India. The Ratan Tata and Aziz Premji donated so much money. They used to give lunch to every doctor, lunch and dinner to every doctor. I know. I salute to Ratan Tata, sir. He has done a great for our country, great thing for our country. You would not believe. I am Dr. Manish Jangra from RML Hospital. I got COVID 2 weeks ago. I was not given bed in my hospital. I could not get bed. I could get bed after 3 to 4 hours of struggle. I am the media spokesperson of the RML Hospital also, and I am the founder of Federation of All India Medical Association also. I am not saying I needed bed. I was not that much critical, but I am the healthcare worker working in the RML Hospital. I was not given bed. I would tell you one story 2 days ago. A nursing staff working in the RML Hospital ICU for past 15 years. Her husband was having the severe COVID, and she requested the administration. She was weeping. She was crying. She could not arrange a bed for her husband, and her husband was died.
Dr. Jangra,
she called me. She was weeping and crying.
Right.
And this is the situation. The reason behind this is the VIP culture. VIP culture.
So there's a lot of favoritism, you're saying, in the treatment. That's basically, that kind of favoritism comes down to corruption. I saw, Gopal, you had a quick response. Please make it quick. Our time is very limited because I want to get back to Devanik. Go ahead.
The important thing is that India is a democracy, and various institutions and the state government in the federal structure have different responsibilities. You raised a very important part about the health infrastructure. Health is a state subject, and the election commission decide when the election has to be held. Then certain religious festival, etc. India is a complex religious society, and culture, diversity, all these things require a different decision making. So these complexities arise, and everything you cannot put into the isolated central government. Another point I would like to mention is that the vaccination program of the central government is one of the best program, and the cost of central government has negotiated very nicely that we have 2 domestic vaccines, and we have almost vaccinated 14 crore people. It is going on. And there are other issues also, that the even economic fiscal stimulus packages had been very positively brought results on the economic recovery. So all things have to be considered. There are gaps. We are knowing those gaps and trying to fill them. And there is no need to panic as such. We are grateful to the other countries also.
Fair enough. Devanik Saha, we just have a minute left, and I need to get you in again. I mean, do you think should and will politicians actually face liabilities here? And I mean, does the public actually understand who is and what's responsible for this inexcusable tragedy?
I think they will face some consequences, but the problem is that the next national elections are in 2024. So it remains to be seen that whether people will understand the implications of this and whether they will actually vote for health as an issue, because health as an election issue hasn't really gotten traction in India much, except a few states. And also, I would like to point out one fallacy which Dr. Gopal had mentioned. If India may have vaccinated 14 crore people, but it's vaccinated means having both the doses, right? So in terms of absolute population numbers, only 1.4 to 1.5% of Indian population has been vaccinated, which is the least among all the major nations. So I think vaccination needs to be ramped up very, very quickly, and India is facing a vaccination shortage. My mother went to a hospital yesterday, and there was no vaccine. She's due for a second dose, but she has not got the vaccine dose yet. So there is a shortage as well. So I would like to point out the fallacy. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Jangra, I just want to ask you quickly as well, because as you know, there were already issues, severe issues with respiratory illness in India because of very serious air pollution. Is this actually compounding the problem now because COVID-19 is in large part a respiratory illness? And that should have also been taken into consideration how severe the pandemic could be for Indians already struggling.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you just repeat the first line of your question? I'm not able to understand that.
Okay.
Exactly what you want to ask.
I'm sorry, I'm actually being told we are really just out of time for this segment. I'd like to thank all three of you so much for being with us on this edition of the Newsmakers. We could have gone on much longer with this discussion. Obviously, there's so much to talk about, but really thank you for being with us, all three of you there from New Delhi. Now, when our next guest first appeared on the Newsmakers a year ago, the search for a vaccine had just begun. And there was hope the pandemic would be over by now. Instead, we're actually looking at second, third, even fourth waves, and whether the global vaccine rollout is even making a difference. Well, joining us this time from Honolulu, Hawaii, to talk about that is Jake Glanville. He's the founder, and CEO of Centivax. It's a universal vaccine technology for influenza, HIV, and other rapidly mutating pathogens. Jake, thanks so much for being with us. Are we, first of all, globally, where you thought we'd be today fighting this pandemic? And what do you make of a country like India getting so caught off guard by a second wave like this?
Sure. So in the beginning of the pandemic, there was an opportunity to apply very aggressive international containment. We've clearly lost that battle. This is a very tough virus to contain. It's very infectious. People remain asymptomatic. In many cases, they don't ever show symptoms, but they can transmit. And that obviously complicates containment. But on top of that, what 2020 showed us was a failure of many national leadership groups on applying sufficient containment within their nations, across nations. We had weakening of the CDC and the World Health Organization. And I think we suffered from an international growing distrust of science. And so that gave rise to conspiracy theories and a lot of doubt about application of masks and other measures. So we are where we are now. The good news is that we have vaccines and this virus is susceptible to vaccination. The challenge is that we, don't have enough vaccines for everyone, and that's going to be true throughout 2021 and into 2022. Even in Europe, and certainly in most of the world, we're not going to have enough vaccines for those who need them. Second, we have a problem with, even if we have the vaccines, there's a lot of people out there who aren't going to take them. And that means that we aren't going to be able to establish herd immunity. And then finally, the virus is mutating. So the vaccinations we're rolling out now, we're already anticipating, and Pfizer and Moderna are already adapting their vaccines, anticipating a new booster shot will be needed to confront the new outbreaks. And unfortunately, because of a combination of these things, and I think difficulty of many national leadership groups to be able to politically or economically take the right sets of measures early, we run into those kinds of crises that we're seeing in India now.
Right. There's another issue as well with the vaccines, and people are asking so many questions. Are we even sure yet that those, who've had the shot or have the antibodies can't still spread the virus as badly and as quickly as those without the vaccine?
Sure. So that question gets asked a lot. There's sort of two questions with a vaccine. One is, does it stop you from getting sick? And the second is, does it stop you from transmitting? So what we know now with the Pfizer, Moderna, and this is being evaluated on the other vaccines, is it appears that they're very effective in reducing symptoms. But we're seeing studies now coming out of Israel, which had a very early, very successful vaccine campaign, that it also is greatly reducing transmission. So it appears that the answer is yes. It's not complete, but it does appear that when you're vaccinated, not only are you very unlikely to get sick, the breakthrough cases are extremely minor, rare, but you're also much less likely to transmit it to others. And that's good news for reducing the rate of these big waves. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, I don't think we have enough vaccine or enough people willing to take it to be able to establish herd immunity.
That is so disappointing. And we also have the Chinese vaccine. Millions of people have taken that shot, and it's showing in a number of cases not to be as effective as we'd hoped.
Yeah.
Is there a risk there
Yeah.
as well that we could be building a stronger virus? Because if it's not knocked out properly with the early stages of the vaccine, can it mutate in response to weaker vaccines and become stronger and harder for us to combat?
That's a very interesting question. I think the thing we definitely know is that those who are not vaccinated, those every time someone gets infected, that's an opportunity for the virus to mutate more. And so we are seeing a proliferation. My laboratory tracks about 650 mutant versions of the spike protein in the place called the RBD that's the most sensitive. And so we saw, for instance, a second wave of mutations around the UK strain, and those are troublesome. With respect to people who've been vaccinated, I think we don't know the answer to that yet. Is the partial immunity where it's breaking through, is that selecting for further mutation and further escape? The answer from historical data from other viruses is probably yes. That's a possibility that a vaccine that is only partially effective, for instance, against the South African strain, could encourage versions of that strain to escape even further. That's something I think we need more data on to observe here, but certainly that is a concern. I would say still that even partial vaccination is better than no vaccination, because your whole objective here is to slow the spread and reduce the amplitude of these outbreaks when they take place.
There's also another effect, and I spoke to an epidemiologist about this, and it is the effect of constant sanitizing, and now what has become a failure to expose ourselves to bacteria and germs that would actually help us build a stronger immune system against bacteria and germs. I mean, could we potentially be seeing a bigger monster being built on that front as well?
I think that one's a hard one for me to comment on. I think the major impact of constant sanitation was the release of antibiotics, in hand soaps and farms, and that has given rise to antibiotic resistance bacteria. I think the separate question of is an overly sanitized society making us more immune susceptible? That one's complicated because, for instance, I grew up in Guatemala, and because of constant pathogen burden, people became more susceptible because their bodies weren't healthy. Whereas a healthy person we're not living in a bubble. Even if you're in a sanitized society, we are constantly exposed to small amounts of various pathogens. So I don't know if it's clear that the reason why India was spared last year was because of less sanitary conditions. I don't think that's a reasonable concern. So I would dispute that. I think the problem here is an extremely infectious virus.
Okay, good to hear. I mean, but we have with these new variants now cases of children and babies getting sick. They're being reported now, particularly in Brazil and India, with the new strains there. Why is that? Why is it suddenly attacking children? And how much are younger people now more at risk?
Yeah, so there's a couple troubling things about the new variant. So these range from the UK strain, the B117, to there's a set of strains, the South African strain, the Brazilian, and the Japanese strain that are all sort of cousin strains. They appear to be significantly more infectious, so 40 to 80% more infectious. Some of these strains we're seeing are now infecting mice and other animals more easily than they were before. And they may be having a different distribution of those the ages of those infected. Now, it's a little hard to tell. If you have a big wave, you see more kids coming in, but it does seem like there's a proportionally more children there that may be being affected, although I would say that data is still coming in. So it's possible that the infection profile has shifted, and that gives rise to different demographics of people who reach the hospital. Again, this is a strong argument for trying to vaccinate because
Right.
the more people you vaccinate, the slower the virus is able to mutate and the easier it is for us to get a handle on it.
Got it. Okay, quick final question for you, Jake. I mean, compared to, the havoc wreaked by the Spanish flu, killing multiple times more people when our global population was actually a fraction of the size it is now, do you think we've been comparatively lucky with this pandemic?
Sure. So I'm going to tell you kind of where I think we've been lucky, where we've been unlucky, and then there is a positive path to the future, and I want to share that with your viewers. So you're right. The Spanish flu killed over 50 million people, and back in 1918, when there weren't that many people around. So comparatively, it was more lethal. However, it also went away faster than we're anticipating this coronavirus is going to go away. This virus is much more infectious and more airborne than influenza viruses, and so that's a problem in terms of global containment. At this point, epidemiologists don't think this thing's going to be going away in the near future. The good news is that we have better vaccines, and critically, we do not have enough medicines. Once you have effective medicines, historically, that's actually what's reduced a global medical crisis to a manageable infectious disease in the cases like HIV and tuberculosis and most of the other pandemic, endemic pathogens. It's when we have effective medicines, it's still around, but you don't care as much because there's a treatment. And the problem is we don't have that yet.
Jake, I'm so sorry to have to interrupt you. We're completely out of time. I'd really like to thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. Extremely valuable. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for our viewers as well. See you next time.